On this episode of Savoring Our Faith, we're going to be making probably the most important meal, my personal favorite, breakfast. It's a time to break the fast and start the day, and obviously, make sure you invite Jesus to your breakfast table. Breakfast. I would say that this is probably a rather theological meal because it basically has the understanding of breaking the fast. And fasting is a pretty important part of our faith because it creates in us a little bit of a hunger. And that hunger obviously is going to be for the most important food, which is one reason why prior to receiving the Eucharist, there was always a fast that we had to take at some point. Many people now kind of minimalize it, but at the same time, I think we need to get back to understand the spirit of the fast as well as the letter of it. However, when you do break it, this recipe, I'm sure, will be one that you will crave and one that will definitely satisfy what you're craving. And what I'm going to be making for you right now is a frittata, and we're going to be starting it off with some potatoes because let me tell you, this breakfast recipe doesn't need to be eaten just in the morning. You could probably even eat this at evening. I know that a lot of places offer for lunches some quiches, which is basically a form of this frittata. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to saute this in a little bit of a mixture of olive oil and some butter. This is basically an Italian form of a quiche. And it has a nice hearty component to it because I'm going to add a lot of flavor into this little frittata with some potatoes, with some spinach, and also some ham that you can just simply get from the deli. While this pan is heating up, I'm going to now just break some eggs because we're also going to make some French toast. And I'm going to make my French toast pretty savory. Because I'm going to add some brown sugar and some vanilla so it'll have some sweetness to it, but I'm also going to be flavoring this French toast with a particular type of syrup, and I'll tell you all a little bit about that. Now, I'll probably do about 4 eggs in here, and I'm going to whisk this up, and this is going to be, like I said, the batter for the French toast, and then I'm also going to break up some more eggs, obviously, for the frittata itself, and this meal, like I said, is so filling that it will be good enough, not just for breakfast, but even, if you're the hearty type. I mean, there's some restaurants that serve breakfast 24 hours a day, just because I think it's just one of those things that bring a lot of comfort. So we've got the eggs beaten up. Let me keep this off to the side. And to this, I'm going to add a little bit of brown sugar, as well as some cinnamon and some pure vanilla extract. And this is going to give great flavor to a typical boring batter. It's also going to give some color and depth of flavor, which is kind of like what I love in terms of food. So a little bit of cinnamon, some vanilla extract, and some brown sugar, and you can see what that'll eventually do. It'll change the color of the batter itself, as well as give deeper flavor. All right, we'll put this off to the side as we crack the eggs and get it ready for the frittata, because I think we're ready to saute these potatoes. Now, I have to admit that breakfast is one of my favorite foods. And why? Well, because usually in the morning I get pretty hungry. That's obvious. However, I think that it's a favorite meal because it kind of reminds me of a few important events in my own life. So sauteing these out to help bring out some of the liquid, I'm going to add just a little bit of salt as well as some pepper. While this is sauteing out, just enough to get a little soft, I'm going to crack the rest of these eggs so that we could make the filling for the frittata itself. And I'm probably using here I'll use about 8 eggs because I want to impart a nice fluffiness to it as well. So 1, 2. Now, like I said, this is probably my favorite meal, and I'm a little biased. It brings me back to some memories. One of my memories is right before going on vacation. I remember, because if you're on vacation, you obviously are going to need that energy to just kind of get through that long day of busy travel. And, my mother, God love her, she would always make the breakfast for us, but it was the smell of the breakfast foods that always got me. You know what? I'm going to use a different whisk for this just so I don't mix the flavors. That always got me so awake, I didn't even need for her to come into my room and say, hey, wake up, because I would smell it, like after a long night's sleep, and hopefully a good peaceful one, she basically would start cooking it all up, and Filipino breakfasts are so different. As a matter of fact, I know the Irish are not going to be happy with me, but I think that Filipino breakfasts are the best in the world because they're so hearty, and I think that's what makes the Irish breakfast so delicious as well. They're just so hearty, they get you going. And so not only do breakfasts remind me of my vacation times when I was a kid, breakfasts also remind me of the last meal that I had before I left for Rome. That is true. So it was kind of a little bit of a last meal. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, they say, and it's kind of neat to know that Jesus ate it also. In fact, served it as one of his miracles that he performed after he resurrected from the dead. He made breakfast for his disciples. I'm going to season these up with just a little bit of salt and pepper again. And now what I'm going to do is just get my ham ready, because we're going to make this one of these kind of savory meals that's complete. You've got your protein, you've got basically your starches, and we're going to get a little vegetable in here too, because we're going to actually add a little bit of spinach to the whole mix. So I'm going to take just the regular slices of ham. I'm going to just cut them up very quickly, nice little strips. And then I'm going to lay it on the side and basically create small cubes. So real simple. Nice. Take this all, put it all together here. Now I'm using a nonstick pan, which is pretty important for something like this, because it's going to require a little bit of culinary acrobats. You'll see what I mean in just a moment, but I will have to eventually flip this all over so that we get a nice even cooking to the eggs themselves. For the fun of it, I'm going to add a little bit of spinach to this now, and I'm going to just chop some of this up, but I'm going to use some of the spinach at the end to garnish the plate, because sometimes, people like to have a little bit of fresh greens to start the day as well, and this has a tremendous amount of fiber as well as a lot of water in it to help keep this frittata moist. Oh my gosh, it's starting to smell just like home. All right, so we've got the eggs all mixed up. I'm now going to add right to the pan here, and you've got to be careful. I'm going to reduce the heat actually to probably some pretty low heat, because I don't want this to cook too quickly. And to help you out with this, you're going to have to use a spatula to kind of help create, I don't want to say a scramble egg, but it will definitely be, the scrambling helps to kind of give it some levity and some fluffiness to it all as well. So we're going to just continue to cook this down. And you know what? To make it even just more special and delicious, I'm going to add some grated cheese. And then you can use any type of cheese you want. I'm going to use just a traditional cheddar, and to get it a little bit in here for the into the mix itself. But then I'm also going to top it off as well. And so you can see, I almost just created a scramble, and it looks like the basis for an omelet, but it's not. it'll actually become a frittata, and it will actually be almost like a little eggish cake that has, just when you cut into it, a tremendous amount of goodness and a tremendous amount of flavor. So we'll just let that settle. And again, I'm using a non-stick pan to help me out. Now, to make this even an easier process, watch this little technique here. As I add a little bit of oil, I'm going to basically lift a side of the frittata up so that I can get a little bit of oil all the way around it. So just again, on the side here, just a little bit of oil all the way around it. And that'll eventually make its way to the whole base of this egg torta, so to speak. All right. Now, I was mentioning that it reminds me of my last meal that I had before I left for seminary. You see, my dad had to go on a trip, and he was leaving, as well as my brother. And so basically what I had to do was say goodbye to my dad because he wouldn't see me off at the airport, which was really good because it was super, super, super emotional. Anyway, I'm going to just do 6 for right now. Regular white toast, and I'm going to cut the edges off of them. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, that's going to go to waste. No, don't throw it away, and then it doesn't go to waste. Basically, what you can do is let this dry out a little bit more, and then grind it up in a food processor with some salt, pepper, oregano, some garlic powder, and any other kind of like dried herbs, and you will have created fresh, homemade Italian breadcrumbs. So don't let this go to waste, all right? Waste is a sin. And the reason why I'm taking it off now is because I want to make these French toast super, super moist, and I want to give it a nice little even quality to the whole thing. So what I have to do is add a little bit of butter to this pan. And again, I'm using a non-stick pan here because I don't want to use so much butter and oil that it kind of just makes it a greasy mess. But the butter will help impart some flavor and prevent this from sticking. Breakfast is all about breaking the fast, and it kind of reminds us that the fast that we take before Mass helps us to hunger what the Lord wants to give to us at Mass, which is the Eucharist. Check it out. We've got this frittata cooking up very nicely, and I'm waiting for it just to settle a little bit. The fact that I turned the heat down means that I'm not going to have a burnt piece of egg here, but you can see that it's still not very cooked on the top side, so I've got to cook it because I'm not eating a raw egg, nor am I going to serve it to any of you. So how am I going to do this? With a little bit of grace, ingenuity, and a pizza pan. So here's why, my movement is called Grace Before Meals, because I have to pray that this all works out. And like I said, with this, we've got to cook the top evenly because the bottom is definitely taking on some of this heat, even though I've turned it down very low. So here's where we got to pray that this works out. Pizza pan right on top, super quick flip, 1, 2, and 3. Beautiful, right? But not cooked just yet. So I'm going to help maneuver this back into this nonstick pan, and there you go. Give this some time to cook and get some levity to it, and we're going to continue on with our French toast. So our French toast is basically the combination of some savory and some sweetness to it, because the savory is going to come from what I top it off with. So, super simple. Make sure that this pan is evenly buttered all the way around, just because I want to make sure that there's a little bit of this butter flavor on every piece itself. And get this out as well. Now, with the French toast, I think this is something super simple that anyone in your family can do. Let me give you a couple hints. I'm using super fresh bread, but the best French toast is going to come when you We're going to use the best tools that God gave to us, our fingers here. The best type of bread is if it's a little old. If it's a little, I don't want to say stale and moldy, but you definitely want to make sure that it's got some of that day-old density to it, because that means that it will take the batter better. And it will also give some texture to the French toast, because you don't want it just to be pure mush as well. All right, this pan is probably only going to take about 5. But I'm going to make it take 6. Because who wants to wait any longer? You know? Who literally wants to wait any longer? So let's get this cooking up. You know, with breakfast food, again, I think what people need to remember is that it is, as the doctors all say, the most important meal that you have, because it breaks the cycle of fasting, of this purification, of this overindulgence that we sometimes take when it comes to food. We're constantly filling ourselves up. Our body needs a break. And that's true also for our spiritual lives as well, which is why fasting is such an important part of our faith. All right, this is taking on some nice color. Well, I might have to flip this quickly, and I am going to do it, and I'm going to actually turn the heat down as well. So, but this is cooking up nicely. I can smell the brown sugar. It's kind of caramelizing with the butter. Well, okay, perfect. But I'm glad that I turned that heat down, and you always want to monitor that. You don't want to turn it up too high at the start of the cooking, because then that means that it's just going to cook one side and basically burn. So we've got this cooking up. Yep, nice. And these are super soft to the point where they're almost going to be very fluffy. But as far as the fasting is concerned, I know a lot of people, especially when it comes to our Catholic faith, this is done, turn this off. We're going to plate that in just a moment. Let's get our simple syrup ready for this so that we can put it literally all together in just moments. Now, I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, a little bit more butter. You got it, a little bit more butter. But if you were to divide it all up, and I'm not rationalizing here, I'm just being 100% honest, the butter itself is not like, we're not eating a pound of it. You know, this is going to feed like maybe 3 or 4 people. And so I'm basically using at the max maybe 2 teaspoons of butter. So that's not a big deal. And the reason why I used a lot less is because I was using a lot of nonstick surfaces here. Now we're going to make a little glaze inspired by a breakfast that I had in New Orleans when they made bananas Fosters for me for my breakfast. How lovely was that? And the bananas Foster itself is just simply bananas. But you know what they did? They actually poured it over some beignets for me. And so it was kind of a neat little take on a French toast. And a beignet is basically just basically some deep fried batter. It's really good. But I do remember specifically the breakfast that I had with my family before I left for Rome. We were all getting ready to, all right, this is cooking up nicely, go to the airport to say goodbye to my dad. And again, I was ready to say goodbye, but we obviously had one more meal together, and it was breakfast. But it was preceded with Mass. I love early morning Masses because what a great way to break the fast, you know, by basically filling up on the most important meal, the bread of life. Fasting is something that every religion has, but something unique about Christianity is that we have the head of the Christian faith, who is Jesus himself. He actually fasted and showed us what it was like to battle the struggles that come with fasting. But if we can do that as he did, 40 days in the desert, it really does help us overcome and modify and moderate our spiritual and physical hungers. So fasting is very healthy to do. All right, so guess what? Our French toast, very French, very soft and moist. Just separating this out a little bit so that when I plate it, oh yeah, this is perfect. You know what? It's so good right now. I think I'm just gonna let the heat of the pan just cook the rest of it out. So I'm gonna turn that off. Sauteing out a little bit of these bananas. I'm gonna add a little bit of a nice zesty citrus kind of flavor to it all by just adding to the top of this the zest of one orange. And you can see how this is going to be more than just sweet. It'll have levels of some savoriness to it as well. And it won't be just a simple syrup, even though we're kind of calling it one. All right. Here, you know what I'm gonna do though? Because I already kind of added that in there, I'm gonna actually squeeze a little bit of this orange juice into it as well. Just to give it, again, just some added citrus flavors to it. Make sure no seeds get in there. Nice little sizzling action. Now to give this even more flavor, we are now just gonna add some delicious cognac here. I know. Be careful when you're cooking with an open flame and alcohol, because basically the fumes will catch on fire if it's exposed to the flame. But I'm just gonna add just a little bit to give it a nice little special quality flavor to it. Let that saute down as I begin to basically get ready to plate my meal. Once the flames disperse, you know that most of the alcohol, at least the harshness of it, has cooked out. I'm going to add a little bit more flavor profile to this by just mincing up quick julienne of some mint. Adding it to the pan also. So we've got some mint, we've got some orange, we've got this richness of the cognac, and now the only thing left to do is add the syrup. A little syrup action in here, and again, you're not gonna even need a lot, because why? We've got so many other flavors going on in there. We don't wanna be decadent. Let's get that stirred up. Perfect. It's gonna make not only for a delicious meal, but even a beautiful meal. We've got some beautiful bold colors here. The only thing that I think I need to do is heat this back up, because I am gonna melt just a little bit more cheese. I would show off and flip this for you, but I'm not. All right, so a little bit of cheese just on top. And now we're just gonna simply start plating this all out. When I had my last meal with my dad and my mom and my family, I just remember thinking to myself, when Jesus said, "Do this in memory of me," when he said, "Do this in memory of me," he was talking about the sacred meal. Granted, it was the Last Supper, but it would be the last meal that he would celebrate with us, which is, in a sense, for us humans, should be the first meal that we celebrate at the start of the day. So we've got these French toast out here. The fasting itself, once again, creates in us a longing for that food. And not only a longing for that food, but a real hunger and almost a yearning for it as well. Now that we've got this simple syrup up and ready, I'm going to pour just a little bit on top of the French toast so that it soaks all up. There we go. And then we're going to break right into the frittata as well. So absolutely fun, delicious flavors. Unique, savory, and oh so soul satisfying. Check that out. And again, as you can see, we're portion controlling a lot of these things so that you can't just simply glob a whole bunch of syrup on there just because we've got just enough, and there's no need to do too much of it. Why? Because it's flavored already. Okay, here's what we're gonna do just to kind of decorate this out. We're gonna create a bed, making this even more healthy and beautiful. create a bed of some spinach. And what I'm going to do is to wilt the spinach down just slightly by putting this frittata right on top. Again, this non-stick pan, super simple. That's kind of the way to go. We've got some melted cheese right on top. Oh my goodness gracious. Perfect. So we've basically got our breakfast here ready. I know that this is something that families can eat and celebrate not just at the beginning of the day, but you can even celebrate something like this for lunch, even for dinner, just as long as we remember that if we hunger for something, then that thing must definitely be worth hungering for. And if this breakfast reminds me of the last meal that I had with my mom and dad, it was only really blessed because before I had that breakfast, we all went to Mass together. And so we're hoping that maybe you can definitely savor your faith with this breakfast food of a spinach, ham, and cheese and fingerling potato frittata, as well as some delicious savory French toast with not simple syrup, but definitely something special to top these French toasts off. So enjoy it. You can get the recipes and more at our website, and we'll see you next time on Savoring Our Faith.